Howdy, friends and neighbors. It is Professor Hamamoto, and the date is May 4, year 2025. The time, 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I welcome one and all here in the live chat. I see we have a nice, healthy number of people participating today. And for those of you who are in rebroadcast, welcome as well. You might have a little bit of blockout in case I get a copyright issue. I have to edit out certain pieces. But for people who are watching the live stream, you're going to see the full, unedited, unadulterated piece. And today, of course, I'm going to be dealing with the relationship between true crime as a popular literature genre and its relationship to state criminality. That seems like a pretty big leap, but by the end of today's talk, you're going to see how they fit together hand in glove. And in doing so, you'll see the inadequacies of most of the true crime literature that's in print and most of it that's on TubeView here. And as you have discovered by now, TubeView is glutted with so-called true crime. And this is what the media establishment wants to see for reasons that I'll explain in a moment. But it's to heighten the fear, to maintain the fear, but also to control it and direct it in a way that it will never touch the true handlers of the system, of the macro system, of the superstate. It always falls short of it, and the people who can control the system conveniently set up certain patsies in order to take the fall, and we get bogged down in personalities. We've been trained, it's like it's second nature to us to look at the world only through personalities. That's why we have celebrity culture and certain individuals that are put out there as fetishes in the sports world, movie, music, and the entertainment areas. We're taught to think through only through the lens of celebrity culture. And it's limiting. And of course, for most of us, we think, well, if we know the latest gossip about X, Y, and Z, then we are in the know. And we have a false sense of mastery of what's really going down in the world. Right. But before I get into it, let me make a couple of brief announcements, something to look forward to. But I have a return guest. The ever popular Mr. Leo Zagami is returning on this channel next Sunday. And guess what? He has a new book. He's really prolific. He has an incredibly new book. I just finished it yesterday. And it's, of course, part of the Confessions of the Illuminati series, but this is volume 12. And Mr. Zagami says this is the final volume of this Confessions of the Illuminati. Now, I'm interested in finding out. We'll learn more this coming Sunday. What's coming down the pike next? Is he moving into a different area altogether, or is it an extension? Is he going to write fiction? Is he going to make documentary films? I know that this is not the end of his creative output. I think this is just the beginning of it. That's just my suspicion. But we'll have to be patient and find out more next Sunday on what he plans on moving into next. But for today's talk, this volume 12 is also relevant in talking about the pedocracy, I guess you can call it. I think that's his term for it. And he speaks about the Vatican in specific as being integral to this pedophilic system, world system, really. And as you can tell by my comments, most of his, Leo Zagami's observations about the current state of the Vatican are not highly favorable, to put it mildly. All right. So we have that to look forward to next week. Also, very soon, I don't have an exact date for you, but it could be any time. I am going to be doing a guest shot on Kirby Summers' new channel. Yes, she's going on to YouTube with her own channel. And I just so happen to have her books right on the shelves, right up front. Something told me that don't don't pack these away. I'm going to have to refer to this pretty soon. And I got this back in, I think when it first came out, 2021. This is Jeffrey Epstein, Predator, Spy. Okay, this is the book. I don't know if it's still available in book form, but if you can obtain it, by all means, get the hard copy. But she was onto this years ago, and as you know, by the recent death of Virginia Giuffre, the whole case is reopened again, and it's going to be with us for quite some time. So I'm looking forward to offering my insights, if I have any, of import about this case and other cases on her new podcast, or vidcast more properly. So we have that to look forward to. Now, let me talk to you a little bit about how this presentation came about. Initially, I was going to be focusing on this one figure. His name's Brian Christopher Coberger, Kohberger, in case you want to look it up. Brian Christopher Coberger, because this happened back in 2023, I believe. But there were 4 students, undergraduates, not all from the same school, but they were all undergraduates at the university in Idaho. I think it was Idaho State. I might be mistaken on that. But the point is that they were all students. They were all having a get together in one space. And so, as it turned out, Brian Koberger intruded upon this gathering. And apparently he had been kind of watching and stalking it, really, to know when an opportune time was to strike. And he killed them all 4 of them. And it was a sensational case. And it's of particular interest to me since I taught at the university for decades. And whenever something spectacular happens at these institutions of higher education, I pay attention, especially a crime like this. And as we'll find out a little bit later, and I've given many talks over the last 4 years, I've given many talks about crimes and criminality in the university campus. Right. And I've been doing a lot of research on this for several years now. So this is part of this process that I've been undertaking for quite a while. But in doing so, I mean, I followed the headline, started reading the basic journalistic pieces. And in doing this, I found out that Brian Koberger was a student of a woman named Kathleen, or is it Kathleen or Catherine Ramsland? Catherine Ramsland, Ramsland. She teaches, I guess, criminology at La Salle University. I'm not really familiar with the institution. I think it might be a church-based institution of higher learning, but I don't know much about it. It's capital DE, capital SALES. I'll have to research that more, but I didn't have time to really probe into the institutional makeup of her place of employment. But she's written a number of books, several books, on what we're calling true crime. And so, of course, definitely, as soon as I found out Koberger was a student of hers at DeSale, I started immediately. I dropped everything, went on the retailer that ate the world, and I ordered all the books by Catherine Ramsland. And they came in, and I'll focus on just one of them today. I have it here in front of me, and it's in the link below if you want to pick it up, and it's recommended reading. It's a very well done book. So, and I must confess, I didn't think it was going to be any good, but she fooled me, because most of these books are they just recount the facts. They're just sort of distillations of headlines that were drawn from journalistic pieces, right? Names, places. They never get into the whys. It's all who, what, where, and when, but not why. But for me, if you're going to study society, culture, the economy, anything, literature, you have to get into the why question, WHY. And she does a fairly good job of it, with one exception, one major exception, which is the reason why I'm giving this talk. And again, I alluded to earlier, her main failing, and she's not alone in this, every single true crime person who gets published by a mainstream entity, in this case, it's Murder Inc. or Crime Inc. is her publisher, they always fall short of connecting the local crime with the universal structure or system, which I will call the state with a capital S, or the superstate. Right? These are the people at the top, the very top of the pyramid, who I'm alluding. These true crime writers never get to that point. Right? And this is not a new insight for me. I'll cite my own work because I'm not a newbie. I know true crime is really popular on TubeU, but I am not a newbie. I'm not. I haven't arrived at the party, right? Just out of the blue. I've studied this and I've published in this area professionally. For you who don't really respect scholarship or the academic enterprise, and perhaps you're justified in that belief, because most of it is garbage. About 80% of it is garbage. It's the Pareto rule, the Alfredo Pareto. 20% is okay, 80% is garbage. That's true of anything, right? So I don't blame you, but I'm telling you this so that you don't tune me out, because what I have to say is important to your survival, your personal survival, and to the health and vitality and survival of the Republic, of the American Republic. Because if this system remains intact into the near and far future, as a civilization, we are doomed. And that's part of the Luciferian objective, to doom everything that it touches, that a touch of evil feels good at first, then it contaminates more, and pretty soon the entity that signed off on it is dead. Lucifer loves to bring down his subjects into squalor and eventually elimination, and he will just laugh at you for having taken the bait. All right, I'm sorry for being overdramatic here. I realize that I slip into theatrics every once in a while, but my meaning is clear. This is a matter of civilizational survival. So just again, to reinforce my bona fides in this matter, I had an article published in a academic journal called New Political Science. It's only other political science people, social sciences are read it. It's not for the layman. It's for the academic specialist. But it was published in 2002. And the title was Empire of Death, subtitled Militarized Society and the Rise of Serial Killing and Mass Murder. This is back in 2002 that I was trying to theorize what is all up in TubeU and published. It's a huge growth industry and podcasts, vidcasts, true crime. I was saying that, hey, there's something here that we need to look at seriously, specifically as it affects and infects the body politic of the United States of America. Right? So these true crime, these serial killer incidents, whether it's in Idaho or in this case in Texas and other parts of the country, we'll get to the book specifically in a moment. These are not one-offs. They're not one of a kind. And you study this crime and you study that crime over here and then over here, and then you move on, right? And the industry keeps pumping these books, these articles, these movies out. And we keep people like, let's say Stephen King, although I happen to like him. Thomas Harris, I also happen to like him, who write strictly fiction, but who nonetheless tap into this deep vein of fear and anxiety that is created. It's manufactured by the consciousness industry, by the entertainment complex, books, movies, new media like we're on right now, comic books, whatever it is. It's always predicated upon crisis, anxiety, and fear. It's a commodification of anxiety. It's angst. And W.H. Auden, poet extraordinaire, wrote an epic poem called The Age of Anxiety. He came across this concept and how he can apply it. He didn't, but others who read his books in the national security state, they said, yeah, we need anxiety to control the population and to feed into this massive industrial death machine, the military, the Department of Defense, all these intelligence agencies, and we'll sell it to the public on the basis of protecting them. And we'll even call it national security. And you see the national security state now runs us. Okay, this is something that the true crime authors do not get to. The editors will not allow it. Privately, if I talk to Catherine Ramsland, she might agree with me, but in print, she will not. She cannot. That's the difference between academic study and pop study. All right. And even in academia, it's very tough to get the truth out there. They didn't let, at my most recent place of employment, the University of California, Davis, I was there for 21 years. When I say recent, that was my last job before I was kicked out. They did not want me to be lecturing about the pedophilia complex, the pedocracy, which I did for years and years and years before they finally realized that I was not joking around. I was dead serious about it. And many of the top level administrators were practitioners of it. So it was a matter of their self-protection to make sure that Professor Hamamoto was put on about three total administrative leaves and 2 separate investigations by the top attorneys sent in from Janet, by big sister Janet Napolitano herself, sent them in from headquarters in Oakland, California, University of California headquarters, to put me out of business. Okay, but I got an early start, 2002. I was already publishing this type of material. And here we are in 2025. And we're still grappling with the problem. The only difference is we have people like Leo Zagami, like Kirby Summers, and others, but we just talked about these 2 authors more recently. So many, many others who have come forward making this connection between the ultra state, the uber state, and these seemingly one-off characters like your Jeffrey Epstein or your Ghislaine Maxwell, right? And we're now at a point where the storyline that is controlled by seemingly credible sources, even they are not getting away with it. In prepping, for example, for this talk, I found out that this particular documentary, many of you heard about it, it's called The Sound of Freedom. It was being promoted by Jim Caviezel, is that how you pronounce it? Relentlessly on all independent media and all your favorite indie media hosts were promoting it. And that's okay. And by the way, this is a good film up to a certain point. But again, it doesn't go the final mile up into the uber state, the ultra state, the super state, the controllers at the top of the pyramid. All right. So I don't want to put this down. Do watch this film, but don't get taken up by all the heartfelt personal stories, the warm, fuzzy human element, right? That always gets us. We like animals. I like to watch animal videos on TikTok just like you do. I think they're cute. So are children. I mean, but we're trying to solve a major problem here. And the problem in prepping for this course, I found out that this film was financed to a large degree by one of the most insidious globalists alive. His name is El Ingeniero. He has a PhD in engineering, and his name is Carlos Slim Helu, Helu. And he owns Estados Unidos de Mexico, and he's got a controlling interest, the New York Slimes. That's Carlos, El Ingeniero Carlos Slim Helu. And you can imagine his family, his people come from the Levantine. He's not a mestizo. He's definitely not an Indio. He's not even a Hispanico. He's a Levantine, right? Just like the president now of Mexico is a Levantine herself. So that's Carlos Slim Helu. And I bought his biography in Espanol in Distrito Federal. I was trying to figure out how the hell did this guy wind up owning everything in Mexico, from all the cell phone companies, Sanborn's restaurant, pharmacy. He owns everything. Now he's coming to America and bought us out. He controls the gray lady, the New York Times, Carlos Slim Helu. But you don't know Carlos Slim Helu. He financed this, along with the Clinton Foundation also had some involvement with financing this. So you see how this problem seems to be always on the point of resolution, but it never quite gets there, right? Purposely. Or there's a set of false resolutions that we're treated to or teased with until the next scandal erupts. I'm going to go off screen for a moment to pick up a couple of giant books that also I can recommend to you, and then we'll proceed. Oh, excuse me. There's 5 volumes. You can see how big this book is, by an author. These are a compilation. There isn't any original research in here. I mean, I got to give him all credit. His name's Joaquim Hagopian. I give him all the credit for compiling all this information, right? And you can still get it on Amazon. I checked before I came on here in case you want to buy it. And I only have three of the 5 volumes. But anyway, it was he that wrote a critical article about the Sound of Freedom DVD that purports to be exposing this child sex trafficking network. It does to a limited extent, but not to the thoroughgoing extent that we need to get to if we are to save the American Republic. Okay, so again, that's another person. This is on my shelf, so I just want to share with you. I've been doing my research for years and years. I worked in the belly of the beast because the university, ideologically and on the curricular level, is contributing to the pedophilic complex, right? And the do-nothing Secretary of Education, who's the wife of some mixed martial arts, so-called. It's really Asian martial arts, but they don't want to give Asian people any credit, so they call it mixed martial arts, right? Yeah, supposedly she's going to shut down the Department of Education, but all that's going to do is allow the universities to go on and continue with their propaganda efforts in creating a self-destructive pedophilic culture. Right. It was a subculture. It was known as a deviant subculture. It was understood by law and by custom as a deviant subculture But if you've been around long enough like me, you see it being mainstream and now becoming mandatory. Because if you're a grad student in the social sciences or the English department or comparative literature, then you have to study Michel Foucault, the perverted French post-structuralist theoretician whose work pervades all the social sciences and humanities up to present. And he was complicit in bringing in this sodomistic violence that we see today in the larger society. So are you getting an idea of how thoroughgoing this system of theocracy is? He died of an autoimmune disease. He never admitted he was into rough sex, including fisting, out in San Francisco. He was brought in at the University of California, Berkeley, as a visiting professor, and he took that opportunity to cross over the bay and go to San Francisco and have fun at all the gay not the clubs, but the private bathhouses, which eventually the city itself had to close down because of the incredible diseases that were being spread. That's what your hero, you grad students out there, that's what your hero died of. He got one too many fists up the, you know what, up the patootie. All right. And that philosophical sodomy has been pervading academic discourse for the last 40 years. I know, I was raised in it. And it's presented to us as being cutting edge and avant-garde, and it's also Marxist, it's leftist, and all right. That's not what I want to talk about. This is one end of the discussion, but the other end is where the public lives, and that's these discussion of the serial killers. So anyway, I didn't mean to go off on a rant on Michel Foucault, but it just really pains me to see a lot of promising professional intellectuals at the university and also who get teaching credentials and go to teach K through 12 who are invested in this worldview being taught by their professors of education at Columbia and UCLA and at Berkeley. All the professors of education are into the sodomistic pedophilic cult. All of them. Otherwise, they wouldn't get jobs and they wouldn't get promoted. And if you stand against it, you're going to find yourself looking for a job somewhere else. And the only place they'll hire you is Pizza Hut. Oh, I didn't have to get a job at Pizza Hut, but I'm at the next best level. I'm at here on YouTube with you. Which, by the way, let me take the opportunity to buy me a pizza and subscribe to my Patreon so I can buy these damn books and read them and these DVDs. It's a pleasure for me to do it. It's an honor to do it. Don't get me wrong. But I still have to, it still costs me some money. And also, the least you can do is, will you subscribe to this channel? I've been on this damn channel for 4 years. I only have 55,000 like that subscribers. I mean, I take it as a personal insult that you have these chat GPT type people, newbies coming on going, they're like straight this proof of concept of chat GPT, and the public eats it up. They have millions of subscribers right off the bat. And I'm not going to name them because it hurts people's feelings when I make fun of pregnant women. Or some guy who's a Nepo baby, whose family probably goes back to the early days of Maryland when it was a Catholic colony. Right? These people don't come from anywhere. They come usually from intelligence. They come from the bloodlines. Me, I come from dirt. Right? You saw the movie Joe Dirt? That's my autobiography. Anyway, see, I got a chip on my shoulder. So let me go into, and by the way, I'll post this article, Empire of Death, on my Patreon because you get good value for your $5 a month. So you can read it at your leisure. I don't have time to read my own work on air anyway, but you can do it at your leisure. So Coberger studied at, I guess, at undergraduate at DeSales University. This is in Pennsylvania. I don't know where in Pennsylvania. He graduated not long ago, 2020. He got a BA in psychology. Don't get me started on psychology, or worse yet, psychiatry. Bobby Jr., if you want to make America healthy again, you've got to treat the psychiatric and psychology so-called mental health establishment. If you're going to be hitting big agri and big pharma, you got to get to big mental as well. These people are screwing us up, and they all work together anyway. It's part of a larger complex. Anyway, I told you not to get me started on psychology. So he graduated with a BA in psychology, and he got a master's degree there. And guess what? Criminal justice. And this is the guy who later killed 4 undergraduates. And who did he study with? With Catherine Ramsland. We'll get a peek at her in a moment. Just hang on, if you will. An associate professor at DeSales, this is from an article in The Independent, described him as being a great writer and a brilliant student. I guess he was brilliant enough where he was able to get into a PhD program at Washington State University in Pullman. Is it Pullman? I can't remember the state, right? And according to this Michelle Bolger, she says, in 10 years of teaching, I've only recommended 2 students to a PhD program, and he was one of them. And boy, did she pick a winner, right? I mean, you read Thomas Harris. You know, Hannibal Lecter was an MD. He was a medical doctor. His specialty was psychiatry. And you read Silence of the Lamb, hopefully. And at least you saw the movie. Thomas Harris knows some deep secrets of the psychiatric establishment. And one of you have to do some research on who this guy Thomas Harris is. That's your assignment. I can't do it. I'm on to other new stuff, but this is my recommendation, right? Anyway, he went to the let's see. He went to pursue the PhD at Washington State. And guess what? He was hired as a teaching assistant. And if you don't know what that means, it means there's a professor who is in charge of the class, and he or she does the lectures and designs the exams and does the grading, most of it. And they have an assistant who helps with the grading. Sometimes they do all the grading. Sometimes they have, some lecture responsibilities, but very rarely. But it's a position of high responsibility and I guess even of status. You're not a professor, but you're not an undergraduate, right? But you do have a certain amount of power. And that's what some of these killers seem to enjoy in common. So he was a TA, a teaching assistant at WSU in the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology. Do you like irony, ladies and gentlemen? If you do, this story here is for you. He did make people feel uncomfortable, according to some people that were interviewed at Washington State. They creeped him out, or he made some unfavorable comments about the LGBTQ community, made him feel uncomfortable. But, if you're a snowflake, you're going to feel uncomfortable. I probably made a lot of insensitive comments about not LGBTQ people, but of the synthetic movement that the Foucauldians are hiding behind. Excuse me. And like him, I was probably ratted out too. But unlike him, I was not a murderer. even though they made them uncomfortable. Some of my students are some of the rat students. Students are very rat-like. They will turn on you very quickly, right? That may be human beings in general, but they'd like to see you brought down and humiliated. That's part of the psychology of the struggle sessions back when Mao Zedong took charge of the Cultural Revolution. Get all the teachers out there, put a little dunce cap on them and wave the fingers at them and denounce them. Or in the case of Pol Pot, they took all the teachers, they put them in a circle, and they just shot them. They cut their heads off, let them their skulls rot, and then stack them up in a giant shrine. That's Pol Pot time, right? Now it hasn't gotten that point in the university, but a lot of people at the university have that mentality, right? And ironically, a lot of them, of my students, their parents fled from those countries. They were the children of refugees from Vietnam, from Cambodia, from Laos, but they were perfectly willing to finger Professor Hamamoto. All right. This is when I got disenchanted with so-called Asian America. Right. This is when I decided that I'm only going to treat people on a person by person basis, but not on a categorical level like Asian America or Black America or Latino or Latinx or working class. But I mean, there are sleaze bags in every category. So you deal with the individual. All right. So fortunately, the administration found enough about him to relieve Coberger of his responsibilities, and then he soon enough was tracked down and arrested by the police and put on trial. I think he's been convicted. I don't know if he's going to appeal. All right. So I looked in as a result. This is kind of a long way to tell you how I got to Catherine Ramsland. So I said, okay, she's really interesting to me. She's more interesting to me than the killer Coberger. So I shifted the focus of this talk to this book and to Ramsland. And I found out some really interesting, creepy even information about Ramsland. Again, I'm going to go out of frame for a moment, so excuse me. But Catherine Ramsland authored this and edited this book called The Vampire Companion, the official guide to Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles, right? Written in cooperation with Anne Rice. Catherine Ramsland, author Prism of the Night. These are part of her true crime. She might write some fiction. I see her sort of as a, who's that woman that wrote fantasy fiction? Really creepy stuff. She knew Philip Dick. I forgot, I did a talk on her. Morris something or other. But I'm not going to put her in that bag. But anyway, the point is that she's an Anne Rice head. And if you know anything about Anne Rice, and I don't pretend to be an expert, this has a mildewy. I bought it used. It smells like mildew. Smells like death. But I'm still going through it. If you know anything about Anne Rice, her specialty is vampire fiction, pop fiction. And many of her books have become movies featuring none other than Tom Cruise, right? The vampire Lestat, right? I still don't understand what that movie was about, except it was some gay guy who pretends to be hyper heterosexual, Tom Cruise, which is really about what the whole vampire shtick is about anyway, isn't it? It's very gay. It's very lesbian. It's lesbianic. It's part of some twisted psychosexual dominance that a certain subset of feminists have adopted in order to exert power in the larger society. And Anne Rice is their goddess, right? And that includes a lot of men who are conventionally, they're called cucks. They're Anne Rice fans, or they are gay, or they're GLBTQ, because they feel that they're trapped in an ugly body that can only come out at night to draw blood from innocent victims. You know the vampire mythos. And I have some of the literature. Yes, I read my Bram Stoker just like you have. This is another old book. It's called The Annotated Dracula. And you know that Dracula is based on a real person, Vlad Drago. He was a foe of the Ottoman Empire, by the way. So his part of the world, he's a hero because he repulsed the Muslim hordes of the Ottoman Empire from Central Europe. That's Vlad the Impaler. Who was he impaling? He was impaling the Mohammedans. But he was also involved in a lot of bloodlust as well. So there's something in our civilizational memory, our civilizational history, our epigenetics that underlies this whole true crime, serial killer, bloodlust. We can't get enough of it in our movies, in our popular fiction, in our comic books. And as I mentioned 5 times already, in our true crime, or even in our literature. Shirley Jackson is considered to be a literary artist now. In the old days, she was just a magazine author from the New Yorker. Now it's prestige if you're an author to have short stories or articles in a very exclusive middlebrow magazine like the New Yorker, right? But she was not considered to be high art, a literary writer. Now she is. She has her own collection in the Library of America. So she's a certified literature person. Oh, I should tell you that she was a witch. Shirley Jackson, a self-identified witch. And since we've been talking about academia, she lived in North Bennington, Vermont, which is where Bennington College is located. It's a women's school. It was for the upper middle class and the bourgeois women who needed to get some smattering of education before they got married to a robber baron or just some Wall Street, a bigwig, right? So she can set a nice table for all the bright, smart set in Park Avenue, right? She was a faculty wife. She was a wife of what was then a prominent literary critic, Edgar Hyman, who wrote for the New York. I'm reading the bios of Shirley Jackson, but she was a witch. So I'm reading all her fiction. I said, yeah, it's again, it also helps to substantiate my operating thesis is that America is soaked with blood. It's no wonder we are the serial killer capital of the world. And it doesn't have to be that way because you know what? At the end, Lucifer says, okay, you've killed the red man, you killed the white man. You went overseas and you killed the yellow man. They've all been vanquished. They've all been killed. They've been blown up with nuclear bombs. They've been poisoned to death. Now it's your turn. And that's the phase we're in now. Auto genocide. That's the agenda that RFK Jr. has on his plate. How to turn back this tradition of genocide to the point where it's become auto genocide. Right. And this process that we're going through right at this moment, modest as it is, hopefully will contribute to a deeper understanding of this struggle that we need to understand so that we can defeat it. Lucifer can be driven back down into the bowels of hell, but it won't happen unless we recognize that this is what has been taking place for the last several decades. When I say several decades, this particular book's time frame is about the middle 70s over a couple of decades, and it deals with largely in the Houston, Dallas area, Texas, right, the Southwest, of missing boys. When I say boys, let's say, be more specific, teenagers. Right, so it's not pedophilia; it's more like ephebophilia. If you want to be, nitpicky about it, these are teenagers that certain these characters. One of them, the main perpetrators, he was killed. By the way, his name's Dean Corll. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Corrl, Dean Corll, who would go out recruiting people, boys, and would use other boys, and he would even pay them in order to bring them into his lair, which was fully stocked with beer, and they didn't have video games back then, but a pool table, ping pong, whatever they did for recreation, TV and tapes and music, whatever teenagers like. And then they would get into sex games, and eventually through this grooming process, which Ramsland does a really good job in describing the theory of grooming, sexual grooming, and seduction. They become partners in crime. And that's why she calls it the serial killer's apprentice, because eventually this guy, Dean Corll, was able to get the younger teenagers as they grew up to become, they were being trained to become serial killers themselves. They became apprentices to him, just as if you were learning a trade. They were learning how to be killers. But more than that, and this is where Ramsland fails, and I'm not blaming her because that's not the focus of this particular book, but this is where she does not fully connect the dots, purposely or not, right? They were also being trained to manage, oversee a nationwide, maybe even international network of pedophilic pornography, right? And remember, we're talking about the 70s, right? This is before the commercial level internet. So this was being done through the mails, the U.S. mail. I don't even think FedEx and UPS were that established. Most of it was U.S. Postal Service, or by person, taking it from place to place by automobile or by airplane. And it was an extensive system where different individuals who are named here, some of them were prosecuted, some were killed, some of them disappeared. They had tens of thousands of index cards of customers, names like a mailing list of people. And here's where my thesis comes into play, is that these people are connected to the government, the super state at the highest levels. A lot of these index cards, which were confiscated by the local police department and handed over to the U.S. State Department, where they were promptly destroyed. How convenient. The State Department destroyed the index card because the index card had names of people in federal government and people who were with the U.S. State Department itself. Right. And again, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying every single person who's involved in these federal or governmental entities are involved. It's probably a minority of them. But what I'm saying here, explains why we're never going to see the full disclosure of the so-called Epstein tapes, right? If the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, were to release all the files, that would create such a crisis, an existential crisis of legitimacy of the U.S. government, that people would say, "Oh my gosh, the people who supposedly govern us are nothing but Satanists." I mean, the main people. Imagine that. What a cruel realization. I don't know if people would be able to handle that. I wanna know the full truth myself. And I think most of us now, since we know this information, it's not coming out of the blue anymore. When I was lecturing about this type of stuff 20 years ago, it would freak out my students. They would go to the therapy, student therapy. They probably had to hire a lot of school psychologists, therapists, because of me. Because the students would be so free, they have to go there and say, "This is true. This is what professor is telling me about this international." I was talking about Kathy O'Brien. That book's 30 years old. I read it, back in 2000, whenever it came out. And this was all information that was kind of underground back then. But I read everything, and I've been following it, and it all checked out to me. And my job as an educator was to bring it to students that freaked out. But we passed that threshold now. Those old students of mine of 20 years ago, if they saw me on the street now, they would probably thank me saying, I had no idea what was going on here. And some of them would tell me very soon after. They said, "How come we're not learning this in other classes?" They said, "Wow, I thought my whole university career was a waste until I got your class." I said, "Well, thank you very much, but just keep reading, keep studying. I don't know everything, but this is going to help you prepare for a life outside the university." And even then, that's kind of a false distinction, because the real life is in the university, because it is a factory of the pedocracy, right? I've given you some stories before about my own personal experiences and observation, so I won't go down that road again for now. Just take my word for it. All right. So here's the Ramsland's contributions that I think are very useful. And I don't have any idea what the average reader, or maybe they just skip through it. I don't. I think this is the important parts of the books, the theoretical stuff. She mentions, for example, how the predators approach victims or marks or potential, I guess, apprentices, right? She said that they usually have a mentoring relationship. But you know what? That's what I was in a position of being a mentor myself. So I was always very cautious of the power that I wielded in this type of circumstance, and made sure that it never got out of control. And there's certain things you can do to make sure that doesn't happen. Right. And that happens in if any field you want to go to. You are the rookie. You are the newbie. You are being mentored. You're being brought along. You're the new guy, right? But in this case, the predators exploit that and create a permanent situation of dependence. I'll read here. It says, "Sexual predators will test for different types of vulnerability, specifically emotional, intellectual, and social. Many accomplices will be insecure and dependent, yielding easily to authority or to manipulation through guilt and fear." And on it goes. This is all common sense. And we all can see ourselves a little bit in this. So this is my other point that I want to make. There's not serial killers here and groomers here and evil pedophiles over here. And then there's the innocent people like you and me, the good guys on this side, right? It's not that binary of good versus evil. It exists on a continuum. That's hard for us to understand, where everything's in black and white, supposedly. You is or you ain't. It's on a continuum. It's a continuum of insecurity, dependency, mastery, authority, manipulation, guilt, and fear. But the serial killers, according to Ramsey here, are really good at picking up how far the accomplice or the apprentice will take it. Will they go so far as to bring someone in off the street? Can they trust them to bring them in so that they can tie them up on a board and then torture them and kill them? Or will they go far enough to start killing them on their own? And by the way, that deal about bringing kids off the street that are their age, that's also in Kirby Summers's book. That's how Jeffrey Epstein was able to recruit all the teenagers that he did, right? He would try to see how far they would go progressively. They weren't really interested in touching him inappropriately. He says, "Okay, but I'll give you $200 if you bring someone who's your age, bring them over here." Right? That seems to be sort of the protocol. I don't know if they get together and decide this, but you can see some similarities in their modus operandus. Then they talk about the now this is the part that I have to do some more research on, and I think it's a little bit too convenient to put in neuroscience, because everything these days now is being attributed to the brain, to neurology. Neuroscience is the big explanatory umbrella. Before it was Freudian psychology, then everything was Jungian, and now everything's neuro. So, quoting from Ramsden, she says, sexual sadism is a neurodevelopment dysfunction involving the desire to dominate others, and some enjoy inflicting pain. That doesn't say anything. It's a neurodevelopment dysfunction. I would imagine a lot of people suffer from that, but not many people go into becoming a serial killer. So the brain explanation, I view the neuro explanation, I view with a great deal of skepticism. But as I said before, I need to read more about it. But you know what? If the money is there for research, people are going to promote the brain. It's going to be the year, the decade, the century of the post-Freudian neurology, neurooptogenetics. There's a guy at Stanford University, Kar Dieserat, who rakes in tons of money every year, getting money on optogenetic neural research. It's a boom industry. And this might not be his case, but I'll tell you in general, I've said it before, and I come from an academic background. A large percentage of that research is bogus. The results are fabricated, they're cooked, they dicker with it until they get the right results. Don't take my word for it. Look at some of these sites that specialize in all the different retractions of these journals. And I forward that information, by the way, on my X page if you're interested. I put the more egregious examples of academic fraud. It's endemic. The academic journals are right now going through a crisis, going, oh my gosh, there's so much endemic fraud. And now we have Chat GPT, and we're finding out that a lot of articles coming from India and China, these are the two biggest offenders, China and India, because that's how they get out of the country, man. That's how they get over to America or to Germany or to Britain, by coming up with a bunch of bullshit science in their home country, getting PhD programs and put to work in a lab here in the US. They go to work for the NIH, and they want to be a successful scientist at any cost, right? This is something that RFK Jr. can address, right? Because he keeps kind of pussyfooting around the science. What about the fact that a good percentage, in double digits, maybe up to 20% of these research articles are bogus, according to their own retraction statistics and external reviewers? If they even have reviewers, a lot of them do not have any peer review. And even then, even if you do have peer review, what if your peers are all crooks too? Right? But the game's over because I understand that Dr. Anthony Fauci is now under investigation, right, for crimes that far exceeds academic dishonesty, right? How does that happen? It happens because you and me, we have these discussions here. We talk about the ugly truths about how the world really works, not how it supposedly works by watching these biddies on the View or watching the mainstream networks, or now increasingly now indie news, which are also limited in scope. So give yourself credit for opening your minds to these perspectives here that once upon a time were seen as verboten. Okay. Wow. And here's the network. And again, this is Ramsden. Again, Ramsden does not go beyond the fact that this being a regional phenomenon. I'm saying it's a national, if not international phenomenon. That's really the issue when we're talking about this trafficking and open borders, right? Reading from Ramsden says, in fact, there is a widespread network of pedophiles from Houston to Dallas, with boys paid or forced into being photographed for pornography. Some boys were enlisted as quote unquote escorts and sent to other cities, right? And this was back in the late 70s that she's writing about. This is before the days of the internet, which tells me it's probably even more extensive now. And she gives the names of certain organizations. One was named the Odyssey Foundation, and they offer all these different social services for at-risk youth to make sure that they don't go afoul of the law. But the people who are taking care of them are these twisted characters who are at the extreme killers. She talks about the different code languages. You remember Pizzagate? They had their little code. The FBI knows all the different symbols. They know all their code language. But I have a feeling the FBI has kind of been given the word that you can only take this investigation so far because so-and-so belongs to intelligence, or so-and-so is a U.S. senator or is on the Supreme Court, U.S. Supreme Court. And we can't allow this because the very legitimacy of the state is at stake. And therefore, we have to indulge in what's called the noble lie in order to keep the system functioning. Of course, the fallacy in that is that you will have a system of rot. That's all that's left. The system will crumble anyway of its own internal corruption. Its necrotic decay will erode its own foundations. So better that we get a handle on the situation now. All right. And there's other figures here that she mentions that tells me that as a criminologist, she's done her homework. She knows her literature. By the way, the book does have an excellent bibliography. She knows the literature. Okay. That's how I read these books. Do these persons know what they're talking about? She talks about the Hare, Hare, psychopathy scale. That's named after I guess he's in psychology, David Hare, Hare, where there's a measure. You can look this up online. A certain measure of characteristics of what constitutes a psychopath, right? But if you read it with enough critical acumen, you can see, wow, that could be me. In other words, the scale itself doesn't really tell you much because, again, I think all of us, each human being is on that continuum. of sadism, of perversion, as well as the more angelic side of our nature, right? Not good, not bad, continuum. We're in the gray zone. And we have to work at being good. We have to continue to reinforce, just like flexing your muscles, exercising your brain, your mind. You also have to exercise moral judgment and behavior continually. And you have to keep checking yourself on, this is what I do. Whatever you do, you know, I'll leave it up to you. But this is what I find myself doing. Is this really, even doing a talk like this, is this going to be helping the problem? Or am I just feeding in to this pornography of true crime? Am I just like these other people who are on these channels who talk about all these grisly murders without going anywhere? They're just a recitation of gore. I'm trying to find what this means, and then having done that, to eliminate the source of the violence, right? So she talks about David Hare. There's all kinds of experts that are involved in the study of it. It's become pretty chic in the academic world, I guess. John Wayne Gacy. She talks about other cases that might be related to the ones back in Houston that centered around Dean Corll. John Wayne Gacy was in the suburb of Chicago. He was known as the Killer Clown. He was also a pillar of the community, a civic leader. He had his own business, but he also had a dungeon of sadomasochistic pleasure of the sort that Michel Foucault would have appreciated, the father of French post-structuralism, the father of Yale School of Literary Comparative Literature Criticism, of Harvard, of all the Columbia, of all the elite schools, the patron saint of sodomy, Saint Genet, Michel Foucault. See, from top to bottom, we are sodomistic. It's biblical. Sodomy and Gomorrah. Sodomy and gonorrhea. All right. And again, part of this network went down to San Diego. And then when I hear San Diego, that makes me think about, oh, that's a huge military base. The military's involved with this. The military's shipping some of these kids in. And a lot of them are Asian. A lot of them were Filipinos. A lot of them were so-called orphans, rescued from the Chakams, from the Reds, from the commies, from Korea. And you had the Korean orphans coming in, and you had the Chinese orphans coming in. I'd like to hear their stories. They must be horrific. And as those kids, if they're allowed to mature into past age 30, where they can overcome the programming and start recovering who they are as human beings, we're going to come up with some interesting insights into the whole adoption agency complex, which are part of it. She doesn't go into this. This is my own observation, my own study in Asian American studies. Right. And it seems like global. I, again, was looking at my friend and colleague's book, Sean Atwood, The Untouchable Jimmy Savile. Most of you know the sordid details about his doings and how they go up high. Right. And we still have some unresolved questions about that. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end it here. We have our work cut out for us. I'm exhausted. I'm mentally, physically, emotionally exhausted. I need to have some curry, Curry, Thai curry. I need to replenish myself. I need to drink some water, some limeade, go on a walk, get my head together. This is very difficult work. I don't take pleasure in it. Honestly, I don't. And I always worry about my own state of being when I undertake these not new, when I continue along these lines. But don't feel sorry for me. This is something I do of my own volition, and I appreciate you most of all for taking the time to listen to these really sordid scenarios. And remember, they're linked to the superstate. And remind Christy Noem, Tulsi Gabbard, Pam Bondi, Charlie's Angels, in other words. Keep reminding them of that fact. And then we have a hope of rescuing the Republic, the United States of America. God bless America. God bless you. I'll be back on Sunday with Mr. Leo Zagami. God willing. See you then. Thank you. Bye.